Hey guys, door is creaking behind me. Um, what a way to start a video. Okay, so today's video is going to be quite a serious video actually, and it's circling around things that are coming up over and over again in the news, and they bother me and they've always bothered me, and it's surrounding sort of particularly female body image and the concepts of beauty and weight and things like that, and how they're having such a negative impact at the moment, and how they take away from us being able to be our sort of authentic selves, how it's sort of like a roadblock put in the way of self-empowerment and being okay with oneself, and it's all very sordid in a way, and ugly actually is probably the best way I can put it. So there are a few news stories at the minute which have shone sort of light on this area, which is why I decided to go with this. I don't know what I'm going to call it, maybe like I don't know, beauty in question or something like that. But the first one is the Abercrombie & Fitch CEO stating he didn't want fat or unattractive people wearing his brand of clothing. So I have the story in front of me. Okay. He doesn't want larger people shopping in his store. He wants thin and beautiful people. He wants people who are wearing his clothing to be one of the cool kids. He refuses to stock XL or XXL sizes of women's clothing because they don't want overweight women wearing their brand. According to this popular teen clothing retailer, fat chicks will never be part of the in crowd. This is a news story. What is wrong with people? There are a number of news stories at the minute, and I'm going to be talking more about the female side of things because obviously I am female, and it is something that affects me, and the way that women are perceived and the way that beauty is rammed down women's throats a lot more than men. It happens to men, no shadow of a doubt. You know, you see muscular men pictures and whatever, but for women there's like this whole level of judgment about physical form, beauty, and all the rest of it. And I think a lot of it is materialistic and capitalism, like ramming down. This Abercrombie & Fitch thing. This is them trying to A, they're doing it for like publicity. B, they're doing it for like a branding, so that the people who can fit in their clothes will think they're cool and therefore will buy them. But it's basically driving into teenage and female in particular insecurities about wanting to be beautiful, wanting to be popular, and wanting to be in crowd. I've never been part of the in crowd particularly. I hung around with a group of girls when I was youngish teens, and there were 13 of us, and we were sort of mid of the road, like there were the really, really rich, popular kids that used to like do drugs and stuff. Then there was us, and then there was other groups. And I actually left this group of girls and hung out with a less popular group of girls because they were nicer. And it was a huge shock at the time that I'd done it as well. It was ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. And news stories like this are coming up all over the place, and this is on the tail end of, we've just had women who had been abducted for 10 years when they were 14, had been abducted, tortured, raped by these older men and held captive for 10 years, and they've just managed to escape. And there has been stories like this a lot, you know, an increasing amount of this is coming to light. That's not to say that there is more of it going on than there ever has been, But there is something really weird and sordid going on with the way the world is perceiving beauty, women, and it's like trying to depower women. It's trying to sort of make out that the way that a 13 or 14-year-old girl is how women are supposed to be for life. And it's like if we drive women into this, they get so preoccupied with dieting, looking like this. They shove a load of money into the dieting industry. They shove a load of money into makeup, cosmetics, clothing, and any exercise programs. Money, 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 money. And then, you know, they're so preoccupied by that they're not going to realise they're being oppressed, maybe. I find notions of feminism interesting. I don't think women should be above men, like women aren't better than men, but I don't think men are any better than women. And this ties into my beliefs as a witch, as a pagan, because god and goddess, male and female, yin and yang, divinity, we are different, but it doesn't mean that anything is better than that. So on the back of this, and then a new news story today that my partner has shared because he was shocked, is that a barrister has claimed that the age of consent should be lowered to 13 to end the persecution of old men. I'm trying to find... Yeah. There's this, it's on the BBC website. This is in the UK. This is today's date. No, yesterday's date. If you want to go look at this news story, it's on the BBC website. Yeah. So basically people are saying that the age of consent for sexual intercourse, or etc., should be lowered to 13 years of age. There is so much research and so much going on to show that young people in general aren't emotionally and mentally equipped properly to make those sorts of decisions at age 13. Age 16 is what it currently is in the UK, and that's, to me, it depends on the individual. Quite often they think they're ready and they're not, and that's not to say people don't go around sleeping before the age of consent, because they do, and that is, I mean, it's partly to do with the individual, it's partly to do with education and their relationship with their caregiver, who is educating them about that and speaking to them about that and imbuing them with a sense of self-worth, and, you know, don't give it away and regret it. Now, I'm bringing up all of these threads because I think there is a devaluation of female going on in society right now. There is things like this, like 13-year-olds aren't equipped. I'm sorry, but they're not. They're not equipped, and they might not even be physically developed enough. And I remember reading about, I've forgotten what the age is. I'm sure it's before the age of 17. The more you have like intercourse before you're fully developed and stuff, you increase your chance of cervical cancer. I didn't actually think of that until right this second, so I don't have the statistics, but there is a link there. Right, so I really honestly feel like there is this devaluation of female going on in society. There's a lot of this presenting of normality, like this female image of normality, that men should be skinny, like anorexically skinny, which is not obtainable, normal, and I don't think desirable at all. And like supermodels, you're seeing supermodels who are like And this is the most desirable aspect of female physiology. And to me, all I say when people bring up supermodels is like, look, those designers would walk mechanical coat hangers down the runways if they could. And you know how thin coat hangers would be, right? Wire. Ugh. And it drives me insane. It really, really, really winds me up. And stories like this, and stories like the Abercrombie and Fitch stuff, it's like, and what next? You're going to have like bouncers at the door deciding if people are pretty enough to come in your store? Really? You deserve to be bankrupted for shit like this. It's just sick. Judgments on female beauty and female body image is just cuckoo. I'm overweight, and I know you can't tell from here to here, and I understand that this is probably going to come up in response, like, if, you know, oh, you don't know what it's like. Well, I am overweight, and I'm struggling with getting down to a sensible weight, and I don't want to show below here because I'm not comfortable with how I am as my body image. Now, growing up, and now, I have an hourglass 1950s figure. Okay, so by which I have big boobs, go in a bit, and then come out a bit again, so hourglass shaped. This is true when I am at my ideal weight, and when I'm overweight, it's, you know, my body shape is the same. I still do this. Growing up in this society, and it's getting worse because it's been a while since I was back then, 10 years basically, even then, growing up with that body shape, I got hell on earth. I actually had people tell me I was unnatural, I was weird looking, that my body shape was wrong. And this is all because of these images presented to young teenage girls in magazines and in music videos and etc. of what a young girl should look like. And I had serious issues with my body all the way growing up. I'm sure a lot of teenagers, regardless of gender, but you know, I'm sure it bothers a lot. But I honestly went through a phase thinking there was something wrong with my body shape. I wish I could have gone back and told myself at a teenage age, like, seriously, seriously, that figure is beautiful, just chill yourself out, because it led to a lot of stuff, and some of it led to being even more overweight because of the depression aspect of things. These stories are just in my mind that this stuff is going on. And there's such a price for these notions of beauty, warped notions of beauty. Anorexia and bulimia and suicide because of things like this are on there. I will have a look for some anorexia statistics whilst I talk to you. So anorexia, I should have done this first, but never mind. So the National Association of Eating Disorders statistics is www.anad.org. Okay, women are much more likely than men to develop an eating disorder. Okay, so I'm just trying to find. Okay, I think this is American statistics. I'm not entirely sure. There are problems with statistics, obviously. Be aware that statistics are flawed. There are problems with statistics. You don't get the overall picture. People don't report it. People aren't honest, etc. Okay, almost 50% of people with eating disorders meet the criteria for depression. only 1 in 10 men and women with eating disorders receive treatment. Up to 24 million people of all ages and genders suffering from an eating disorder, anorexia, bulimia, and binge eating disorder, etc., within the US. Eating disorders have the highest mortality rate of any mental illness. According to a study done by colleagues at the American Journal of Psychiatry in 2009, so a bit outdated, crude mortality rates were 4% for anorexia, 3.9% for bulimia, 5.2% for eating disorder not otherwise specified. And, you know, it gets worse and worse and worse and worse. So the problems that are sort of, you know, people are dying from this, like, and what isn't highlighted just by mortality rates is the fact that there are coping anorexics and bulimics and people with eating disorders who basically live with it. You only have to look at supermodels. Like, you read things about them eat. I remember reading a story about supermodels who were eating cotton wool. And they were eating cotton wool because there was no calories in it and it made them feel more full, and it was actually really high risk, it could kill them. And that was some years ago, and that I read this. I can't remember where from. I'll have to see if I can find a different news story. And then recently I think this is all tied in with this media perception of women, of having to be beautiful, of having to be thin, of having to look like a 13-year-old boy, basically, and it's just so wrong. It's the de-empowerment of women. Why aren't women allowed to be in all shapes and sizes? You see a few advertising agencies going for the whole let's embrace women as they're supposed to be, but it's the sort of like Dove adverts, if you've ever watched Dove adverts. But the cynical side of me says, are they just doing that to make money off that idea rather than drive that moral and ethical standpoint home? I hope not, but businesses, you know. And there are shows that try and address this, and how, you know, if you've ever seen I think it's Fat versus Skinny, like, I can't remember, and they sort of discuss the problems of both, like of being really overweight versus being really underweight, and how dangerous it is, and they show what they eat or don't eat, and they swap diets for a week or something, and it's just painful to view. I think it's just blown my mind. You can probably tell it's blown my mind. I've got things that I want to discuss about it, and it's just so emotional and volatile. It's just so ugly. This whole perception of women as this is beauty and this is the box you must fit into, and it's just wrong. And it's a complete devaluation of women in the intellectual sense, in the spiritual sense, in any sense outside the realm of the physical form. And there is a lot of that going on right now. In, like, music videos are getting worse, I've noticed. And this is an interesting point. Music videos have always been a bit iffy because women in videos seem to be very, very objectified, basically. And I had a thought recently that has been bugging me. And if you go and watch, like, even half an hour, particularly dance music videos, and the sad thing is I quite like dance music when I'm exercising, so I'm like putting, and I'm just half the time not looking at the TV and just listening to it, because the high beat music helps me exercise. Don't want to be staring at sticking sets in barely a bikini. However, whilst this is getting a lot worse for women, with women literally wearing underwear or barely anything, there was that LMFAO video, Sexy and I Know It, where they're wearing little man trunk things. I forgot what they call the ugly little things, which show off everything, right? And it was done in sort of humour, and it's sort of poking fun at all those types of music videos. And they are basically shaking their packages, thrusting their packages, wiggle, 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 wiggle. And if you watch this on TV, they block it out. So a man in short little tiny trunks wiggling and gyrating is blocked out. However, there are 20, 30, 40 women in less doing exactly the same thing, but that's fine. Double standards, basically, and it's the de-empowerment of women. It really, really is odd. I sort of watch shows like Mad Men and wonder, have we actually moved on from that period in history? Because it doesn't feel like it. It feels like we're retrograding. It really does. Stories like this, Abercrombie, if you're a fat woman, you can't wear our clothes. And now, I'm not as big as the sizes that they are talking about. So I don't come into that category, so I'm not outraged because I can't wear Abercrombie & Fitch. I will never wear Abercrombie & Fitch from this day forward. I've never worn them before, but I definitely won't now. Shocking, really. And there's so many key issues to cover in this point. There are people dying. There are people who are sick. There are people whose families are going through hell trying to help them. There are people who honestly, in their minds, believe there is something really, really wrong with them because they don't look like supermodels, etc., whatever. And I can't even imagine what it's like as a parent to come up against all of this, because you are, as a parent, I presume, you're trying to empower your children to make choices of self-confidence and self-worth. And, you don't want them to be sleeping around to make themselves feel better. You don't want them to be starving themselves with anorexia or bulimia, throwing up food. You don't want them to be damaging themselves physically or emotionally or mentally because of what society deems to be the beautiful stereotype of women. And like, that's the key defining thing about being a woman. This sort of thing has always bothered me, and it's why somebody tried to insult me recently by saying, like, I was supposedly being pretty and not expressing an opinion, like a 1950s housewife. It's just, as a witch, as a pagan, and as a woman, it's so insulting. It's just so insulting. It's not insulting to me that, you can't wear our clothes, because technically, by their standards, I am not that overweight that I couldn't if I wanted to. I don't want to, ever. And I don't really fully understand it, right? Because the human preoccupation with beauty and attractiveness, etc., has roots in a reproductive sense. Like, you have to find your partner attractive to, reproduce, or to from a purely biological standpoint of beauty, that would be one explanation. The other is, you know, you're looking for love and fulfillment, and attraction and sex has to be part of that connection with the person who you want to connect with. That's a slightly better explanation because it takes into account psychology rather than just biological urges, which we've moved past, let's face it. You know, anybody who's like, we're only going for this certain type of man so we can reproduce, it's like, we're not down there, we've progressed past that point. Most of us, hopefully. So of course you want to feel attractive, and you know, you want someone who finds you attractive. And I really honestly think we are educating a whole legion of young boys wrong as well. Like, you see some of the men's magazines and you just think, well, A, it's all complete airbrushing. There was this fantastic article recently which showed all these pictures of actresses and etc. off the front of men's magazines and what they actually look like, and then what the photograph turned out as because of airbrushing. And like, they were slimming legs down and bringing boobs up. There was Mariah Carey, and basically they got rid of any mark on her body and slimmed her legs down, I think it was. And then there was Keira Knightley, and she was flat as a pancake because she is skinny, and on the movie cover, you know, bump boobs, all of a sudden they don't exist. And so it's just filling young men's minds with this really wrong perception of what women are supposed to be. A, what they're supposed to be like physically, and B, that they're just there somehow to sexually gratify men. Straight men, obviously, you know. This is obviously from a straight perspective in this sense, of which this is the only sort of realm I can give opinion on. I'm not sure how it works in homosexual, lesbian, and etc. ways of, I don't know if the magazines tailor to them or not. I assume there must be magazines to tailor to them, but I really don't know how it varies in what images are presented of beauty. Post down there on VR about it if you know, you have experience with those things, because I'd be interested to know if that differs at all. Yeah, so men's magazines, and really the really bad ones, like in England, it's like nuts and stuff. It's just filth. It's just sick, and I'll explain that in a second. And it's literally just like women wearing nothing, and women are there to pleasure men. And I remember going out with like one of the worst men I've ever been out with. He ended up being domestically violent, and it was at a stage when I was in teenage development, so I was young, and it was, you know, all those images made me feel bad about myself because he was staring at all this crap. And I remember opening it and reading it, and it was Jodie Marsh, and she was a columnist. And there was this one excerpt, and it was like, it said, if a woman says no, she probably doesn't mean it. And from that day on, I took once I read that, I took a huge basic. It was basically saying women are made basically up for it, and she might be playing coy, but she wants it really. Basically, that's rape, guys. Sorry and all, and I was infuriated with it. Infuriated. That was some years ago, though. I mean, this is 2000 back in the day. I don't know. 2000 maybe. I'll see if I can find that article as well. I bet I can't. But yeah, so it's all this sort of depowerment of female, and it goes so strongly against how I feel as a pagan. Like, we're supposed to see all the beauty in ourselves We're supposed to strive to be the most authentic person we can be, for higher understanding, for intellectual pursuits, for being our creative and authentic soul. And then all the world around us is focused on the physical trapping rather than allowing us to look into ourselves and be who we want to be. There is almost no stress on intellectual pursuit. Where is all the stories on how important it is to be the best person you can be and educate yourself and go down that path? Barely any. It's all in imagery, in advertising, in videos, in magazines, and it's all to do with money and all to do with selling, and it's just so ugly. I think I'm going to stop because the problem with this video is it's quite emotional and it's very difficult to get it across in sort of facts and things. But I really felt I had to say something about it because it's just, I don't really know why society is doing this and allowing it to stand. Many blessings.